Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. This time we are going way back.
Oh, yeah.
To the very beginnings of Christianity.
Right.
We're going to be looking at a letter
Okay.
from the Apostle Paul to a community in Corinth.
Mm-hmm.
It's 1 Corinthians chapter 5. And this is a passage that, well, it reveals a pretty serious conflict. Yeah. And it had Paul calling for some pretty drastic measures.
That sounds intense.
It is so.
Yeah.
To give us some context, can you kind of set the stage for us and tell us what exactly was going on in Corinth?
Yeah. So you got to imagine you're part of this brand new religious movement, right? You're trying to define your identity, your values.
Right.
In a world that doesn't really understand you, doesn't accept you. And then you find out that one of your own is living with his father's wife.
Whoa.
I know, in those times, that was a serious no-no, even outside of religious circles.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that would cause some problems. So how did Paul respond to this?
Well, he definitely didn't hold back. Even from a distance, you can just feel his anger and distress coming through in this letter.
Really?
He talks about being deeply sorrowful. He calls for this man to be judged and even handed over to Satan.
Wow.
Pretty intense stuff.
Handed over to Satan. I think we might need to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
What did that actually mean back then, and what was Paul hoping to achieve with this?
It's a phrase that has puzzled scholars for centuries. I mean, some people, they see it as a literal, like, demonic possession kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
But most scholars, they interpret it as a form of excommunication. You're basically cutting this man off from the community, from their support, protection.
Right.
It's like a wake-up call, you know? Trying to shock him into repentance, make him realize the gravity of his actions, and ultimately bring him back into the fold, spiritually healed.
So almost like tough love.
Exactly.
But with the intention of saving his soul, even if it meant pain in the short term.
Yeah, and it shows you how different their thinking was back then. It's not about retribution. It's about rehabilitation.
Interesting.
But with a very, very harsh method.
Yeah, it's a pretty different way of thinking about punishment than we do today.
For sure.
So what about the community in Corinth? How did they react to all of this?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. It seems like they weren't as quick to act as Paul wanted them to be. He actually criticizes them for their inaction and pride.
Huh.
It suggests that they weren't taking the situation as seriously as he thought they should.
You have to wonder why, though. Why they weren't more proactive about it.
It's possible there were things that Paul, who was far away, didn't fully grasp.
Right.
Maybe there were cultural or social factors at play, or perhaps there were even internal divisions within the community that made it difficult for them to agree on a course of action.
Right, and to really drive his point home, Paul uses this really vivid analogy.
Oh, yeah.
He compares sin to yeast. That can spread and corrupt the whole batch of dough.
That's a powerful image. It speaks to this deep fear they had, that one person's actions could contaminate the entire community.
Spiritually.
Yes.
Morally. He's basically saying that sin left unchecked can undermine everything they're trying to build.
Exactly.
So ultimately, what does Paul tell them to do?
He's very clear with his instructions. He tells them to expel this man from the community and avoid close association with anyone claiming to be a Christian, but engaging in serious sin.
Wow.
He even says, do not even eat with such a one.
Those are some strong boundaries. Why such a seemingly harsh stance?
Well, remember, these early Christians were a minority group trying to establish their own identity, and for Paul, maintaining those boundaries was crucial for their survival, internally and in the eyes of the outside world.
So he believed that by upholding their values, even through these difficult decisions, they were showing the world the power of their faith.
That's right.
This whole thing brings up an interesting question about judgment. It's something that is still really hotly debated today. Paul seems to be saying that judging those within the community is necessary to maintain its integrity.
Oh.
But judging those outside the community is not their place.
Exactly. It highlights the tension that exists in any community between grace and accountability, between inclusivity and the need to uphold shared values.
Yeah.
And it's something we still grapple with today.
I think so too.
In all sorts of communities.
So for people listening today, what do you think is the most important takeaway from all of this?
You know, I think it reminds us that communities, even faith communities, are complex and messy. There will always be disagreements, challenges, and even scandals.
Right.
The question is, how do we respond? How do we hold each other accountable without becoming judgmental? How do we maintain our values without becoming insular?
Those are some really good questions. that are worth thinking about.
Definitely.
No matter what kind of community we belong to.
I agree.
Definitely some food for thought. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And to everyone listening, we'll see you next time for another deep dive.